So there are no words for marriage, consensual sex, or rape in biblical Hebrew. That is to say, there are no words in biblical Hebrew that specifically or even primarily mean these isolated and distinct concepts. Instead, all three of these ideas are referred to with a variety of conventional idioms and euphemisms, and that means that we are heavily reliant on context rather than specific language to be able to distinguish between these things in biblical narratives and in biblical law. For example, the most common word for marriage in biblical Hebrew is lakach, which literally means to take. So a man takes a woman, and then we just infer marriage from that based on the context. But lakach can also have a very violent connotation to it. So, for example, in Deuteronomy 21, in some of the laws of war, if you see amongst war captives a beautiful woman and you want to take her, right, that's the same word, but in this context, it very obviously does not imply a consensual marriage. This is a woman whose family you've recently slaughtered, who has been reduced to the status of a slave, and now can become your slave if you want to take her like an object, right? So the word itself is incapable of distinguishing between marriage and then this much more rapacious kind of idea that we have here. In fact, there are a number of words of like economic or object exchange that are used in context of kind of marriage and sexual relations. So, for example, a word as simple as give, to give, natan, is also the word used in those patriarchal narratives where a like primary wife gives an enslaved woman, a handmaiden, to the patriarch so that he can have children with her. But that giving is neither generous, nor consensual, nor is it even like a fully formed marriage. It's a secondary marriage or a concubinage or something like that instead. And you can also just straight up steal women as well. So, for example, in like Judges 21, in the sort of following the attempted genocide of the Benjaminites by all the rest of the tribes of Israel, the men of Benjamin slaughter a bunch of men around Shiloh and then take the virgin women from Shiloh to be wives. But they literally pick them up and carry them. They steal them. So it's all this object language that they were robbed from the land, right? And ostensibly this is to take them to be wives. But again, this isn't really marriage so much as it is just pillaging women and then subjecting them to forced coercive sexual relations. The first word used in the Hebrew Bible to refer to what we could probably assume is consensual sex is yada, which literally means to know. This is the word used to describe sexual relations between Adam and Eve, for example. And know is, I guess it's kind of a romantic word to use, I suppose, to describe sexual relations, but it doesn't, the word itself does not entail consent. It is also used in contexts of clear sexual assault. For example, yada is the thing that the people of Sodom want to do to the angels who come to visit Lot. And that's obviously not a consensual situation. So while the word itself can be fairly translated as consensual sex on some occasions, the line between it and rape is not distinguished on a linguistic basis. It's all context. The other common word for consensual sex is shakav, which means to lay, as in like to lay down with someone. And it carries with it some of the same ambiguities that like the English idiom to sleep with does, right? You can sleep next to someone, you can even sleep with someone without necessarily entailing sexual activity, but also the term is used in a conventional way to refer to sex as well. There are a lot of laws, presuming consent that use the term shakav. It's frequently used in narrative to refer to consensual sex, but it doesn't have to. So, for example, shakav is also the word used to describe what Lot's daughters do to him after they get him so blackout drunk that he can't even remember what's going on. I would describe that as rape, but the word there is shakav. Shakav is also what Absalom does to David's 10 concubines on a rooftop as a ritual of humiliation. It would be very difficult, I think, to argue that that's consensual, but he just shakavs with them, right? And then we know from the context that this is not consensual sex. Apropos of the last video I made, shakav is also the word used to describe what David does to Bathsheba. So the simple fact that it uses shakav there, which can in some circumstances refer to consensual sex, does not entail that it is consensual sex. Then we get to the words commonly associated with rape. Again, there is no specific word that means rape. There is no rape word in biblical Hebrew. The two most common words associated with situations of rape are what appear in this comment right here, ana, and then various inflections of hazak. So ana literally means to humble or to bring somebody low. And there are some circumstances, especially in like penitential prayers, where this is a good thing. Ana is a good thing, to humble your spirit before God, for example. And there are genuine situations in which the demonstration of humility is morally benevolent. And so in those situations, it's a good thing and has nothing to do with sex at all, consensual or otherwise. But ana is also used in situations that seem to be communicating rape. So for example, this is what Shechem does to Dinah, which most people read as an instance of rape. This is also one of the several words used in the situation where Amnon rapes Tamar later in the David story. Ana is also one of the words used to describe that encounter as well. But, and here's the tricky part, it can also be used in situations where consent is implied, at least as far as the author is concerned. So in Deuteronomy 22, in a cluster of laws related to adultery and rape and other kinds of morally problematic forms of sexual activity, in Deuteronomy 22 verses, I should have checked, but I think it's 22 through 23, there's a circumstance that's being ruled against in which a man sleeps with a young woman who is betrothed to be married to somebody else. And in this situation, consent is implied. It's implied by the fact that the woman she's in a city but doesn't scream. So is this a good criteria for establishing consent in like the real world? No, the absence of a scream is not necessarily indicative of consent. Just because a person doesn't resist doesn't mean that they are consenting for a whole host of reasons. But as far as the author is concerned, the absence of the scream is evidence of her consent, and that's why in this law both the man and the woman are executed. The man because he slept with a woman who is somebody else's like property, betrothed to another man, belongs to another man. But the word used to describe what the man does to the woman is also ana. So he humbles her in the sense that he has put her in a immoral situation because she is committing adultery with the man against the man that she is betrothed to. But it's not rape, right? At least as far as the author is concerned, it's not rape. As far as the author is concerned, so ana can appear in instances where there is something morally compromising about the situation, but consent is still implied. So it doesn't function perfectly as a word for rape, specifically, that is sex without consent. And last we have here hazak, for which there are no counterexamples. There are no instances in which the word hazak appears like this, or inflections of hazak appear to describe a sexual encounter where it is not rape. The problem with hazak is that it literally means to force or overpower. And so it can be a helpful and somewhat precise word in describing instances of rape in which the perpetrator physically and violently overpowers the victim. But it's not good in situations where a person is raped, but that element of explicit physical violence is not there. So if a person is raped by coercion or by threat or by blackmail, or simply by the sheer force of the disparate power dynamics that are at play, or by some implied violence that might happen to them, or something like that, that word hazak cannot capture a phenomenon like that. And as a result, it's not a great word for rape. So all that to get back to the question, why isn't the word ana or the word hazak used to describe what David does to Bathsheba? The word ana is not used because her social status wasn't diminished in the act, really. And the word hazak is not used because he did not physically and violently overpower her. But the absence of those terms, as hopefully has been communicated in this video, doesn't necessarily mean that rape did not take place. Or rather, let me be even more specific, that David did not rape her.